This presentation is the descriptive and narrative portion to the full set of slides. The three of us who are presenting are from George Brown College in Toronto, coming out of the Community Services, located in the Social Innovation Hub with a restorative focus. Changing Mindsets has a number of references. One, it addresses embracing restorative practices to alter how people view themselves, their capabilities, and also how other people view them. Changing Mindsets also refers to the model of teaching and learning that underpin and supported the ability to facilitate those change mindsets. Repair is in the building. As I said, Elvis has left the building, but repair hasn't. If you want to build alternatives and you want to repair situations, one of the best ways to do that is to build capacity. This work, as I said, comes from the Social Innovation Hub at George Brown College. It's an early stage incubator and connector for the generation of innovative ideas, projects, and social enterprises. It had 25 students over the last year, 33 projects, 100 plus partners and participants, and also generated over $10,000 in grants. The focus of the Social Innovation Hub is to really develop habits of mind based on these various skills. So we're looking to support students to be creative, to be innovative, to have a focus on social change and justice, to address the silo configuration around services, and at times to disrupt. Within the Innovation Hub, there was a specific focus on restorative practices that we call Just Us, a place for restorative practices. It had a number of components that bundled together initiatives over the past 12 years in order to give students the opportunity to pursue their passion developing projects that had a restorative focus. Some of those were based in Toronto and the local communities and agencies. Some were based within the college itself and looking at transforming the college and its orientation to particular issues. And some of these initiatives had to do with international placements. It also gave faculty an opportunity equally to concentrate on restorative practices. There were a number of undertakings in the restorative place. 5 trainings were held over the past year. There was a focus on elementary school-age children. There was a placement in Jamaica that complemented the focus of the Jamaican government on restorative practices. Students worked in prisons as well as alternative school placements. We put on a play that was offered to all community service students, over an audience of over 300, as well as a social justice conference that was offered to grade 11s and 12s from 3 school boards. One student developed a People's University Cafe. The intent behind that and the model is to take the knowledge and the experience in colleges and universities and take it into the communities and onto the streets. We worked with the Toronto District School Board to begin to develop what was called restorative zones. These were school-based placements for a cadre of students who could focus solely on restorative practices in high schools. We worked with the college residents to talk about the possibility of integrating into this new residence a restorative model for relationship building and community development. One student undertook to work with a youth employment services to develop relational and restorative team building skills for disadvantaged youth beginning to seek employment. And lastly, but not least, was the development of a community hub following on the tragic deaths of a number of young people. Talking about the model of teaching and learning. One suggestion is that the best way to support students to develop their skills is to allow them to apprentice themselves with a problem of their own choosing. Very much reflected in what's called project-based learning. It's a systematic approach to learning that begins with a problem or question, begins with sustained inquiry that comes from the thoughts of students who then begin to work with others to develop the full range of their projects and go through a series of iterations to develop and design something that can be offered as educational or skill development, and then can take on other forms in terms of manualizing the end product and presenting it to larger audiences. At the same time, this model of teaching and learning, one could say, is very much restorative. It reflects very much a relational approach to teaching and learning. It engages and allows faculty to engage with students in a radically different approach where contact and involvement happens on a daily basis over a series of different developments, some of which have to do with mistakes, dead ends, and failures, but also includes wider community consultation and networking. So let's look at some of the projects. The three that we selected were to reflect an ecological scope of practice. One focus was on elementary school age, the other had to do with parents, and the other had to do with community development. The Da Vinci Public School Peacemakers Initiative took place in a school in the Toronto District School Board that was one school on a site that had two schools. The focus there was working with grade 5s and 6 to blend restorative principles, values, and practices with fundamental social emotional skills. The intent was to develop them as leaders. So a series of workshops took place over a number of months, which then went into phase 2, which intended to take and support the grade 5, 6s as leaders to then role model for grades 3s and 4s, which then at the same time would allow the two schools to come together as one community. Prior to the development of the Peacemakers program, a parent from the school, who'd also been in the restorative play, approached myself and wondered about taking the training in restorative conferencing. After having taken the training, she said to me, "Let's change the world." I said to her, "Hold on to that thought." Because at that time, I was doing my master's and about to take on an action research project. At the same time, the hub was developing and beginning to integrate the restorative focus. So this is a great opportunity to blend the two together. And that's exactly what I did. I went back to her and began a process using the action research frameworks to develop a focus and an initiative around parents. What this became was a series of workshops, 4 workshops that have been offered twice now, and we're into year 3. And the intent behind the workshops was a number of focuses. One was to support an active role for parents in relation to schools. It was to address the unique elements of parenting that often are not captured in our restorative work, to look at the role of attachment, the role of the foreverness of being a parent, to look at the intensity of the parenting role, which often involves life and death. Towards a Higher Journey, or TAJ, comes from the initials of one of the young fellows who was killed in his neighborhood. This was a restorative community building approach. Based on this tragic circumstances, Simone, who was the mother of this young boy, took a restorative approach, which, as she says, found her being restorative even before she knew about restorative. She wanted a very different response to the young people in her neighborhood and in her community who were causing such harm to others. She looked at her community and saw it was a community that had many broken pieces. And the challenge became survival which is not enough, which allows and supports people to become comfortable with dysfunction, but really doesn't change anything. So how could there be a different type of success? Based on this belief, this passion and problem, she decided to take a focus on the community that embraced restorative justice. She wanted to see an approach that would repair the harm by restoring hope. It would break down barriers, rebuild relationships and trust, create community inclusivity and collaboration, meet community members where they're at, and healing through voice and recognition. This meant then undertaking a very major effort to develop a restorative hub, which is partially there. It would restore the community by providing a refuge, having an impact on the lives of youth that would eliminate the divisions, but also move youth away from criminal activity and sometimes leading to death, provide inclusivity and culture, create a safe and holistic space, and a place where members can unite and be empowered. Simone's quote is this: "Every child has the ability to write their life story. Without members of the community are committed to making a change, many of their stories will end in tragedy. Though we may not be able to reach all youth, we are determined not to give up on any of them and will therefore continue our work towards a higher journey." Lessons learned from the hub and changing mindsets. Changing mindsets transforms roles when we promote the acquisition of skills and attitudes that support peacemaking, relational engagement, and empowered communities. It is relevant and real for each of young children, youth, parents, families, schools, colleges, and communities. Changing mindsets occurs when the mindset for teaching and learning embraces a partnership for and with students and faculty that allows them to pursue their own authentic voice. Thank you for your time.